Yes, welcome into the camp. Badgers were back on the field on Thursday morning, and they were inside the McLean Center because it finally started to rain again. Felt like it's been a while. It felt like it rained all summer, and then when we were down in Platteville, it was the hottest it's ever been all summer, and now finally we get back and finally get some rain again. But they were inside the McLean Center this morning for practice number, I think it was 13 or 14 of fall camp. We've got one more practice open to us coming up on Saturday. It's going to be a scrimmage, full pad scrimmage. Hopefully that's outside. Hopefully they get good enough weather and that can be out in the stadium, right?
I'm all for that because I'm pretty sure they play all their games in the stadium.
In a stadium. Well, what are we calling the thing down at Northwestern? Because I don't know. I don't know that we're going to be able to call that a stadium. That feels like a park or a gathering. Stadium feels a little strong for that.
All right, I'll preface it with home games at a stadium. I have to say, side note, I'm kind of looking forward to the Northwestern game as a one-time only experience, just to watch a grandstand with 15,000 fans on the shores of Lake Michigan, but I wouldn't want to make it a habit.
I was actually really looking forward to not going to Chicago this year. I was really hopeful that that Lambeau thing was actually going to be the truth. Unfortunately, it's not. It's funny though, because like they're only playing games there until in October, right? Because they're playing Ohio. I think Ohio State's at Wrigley Field. And I think one other game's at Wrigley Field. They're not playing. They didn't actually want to set anything up at Wrigley Field just in case the Cubs, I assume, made the postseason, which is hilarious now that you look back at it because of where they are in the standings. I guess I haven't looked at the wild card of late, but the first year of Craig Counsell was expected to be better than it was. Either way, Wisconsin will play at, you called it a grandstand. I think actually, you know what? I think grandstand works, right? Like it's the only permanent aspect of that stadium, right? Is like this little grandstand. I know they set up other stuff and they got all that temporary seating around, but will it be a better environment than it was at Ryan Field?
It'll be better for me because Ryan Field was like going to a glorified high school stadium, and at least this will have a nice view.
Do you think it'll have a nice press box?
No idea. I don't think anybody cares.
Really? You don't care?
I
hope it's
the
coldest. Well, you're part of anybody, are you not?
I mean, I hope it's indoors somehow.
I hope it's honestly, after you just said that, I hope it's the coldest day in October in Chicago history, and that wind is coming off the lake and it's blowing you all over the place. Your hair is just going all over the place. Mine's not, obviously, because don't have any. But I hope it is the coldest day ever.
Will not be topped by the 2018 Pinstripe Bowl in the open-air press box that is Yankee Stadium for a game in late December.
Do you know what also won't be topped? The space heaters that they had for us there. Do you think there's going to be space heaters? You think Northwestern's going to be giving us space heaters as you're sitting out there on that grandstand because there's no press box?
I fully expect it.
All right. Before we get into what happened at practice today and what Mike Tressel and the inside linebackers had to say, we're also going to check in on the true freshmen and see how they're coming along. Going to do a little true freshman check-in. I need to remind you again that the Home Field is the official apparel sponsor of the camp, and they're getting their college football season going here with their Can't Miss kickoff campaign throughout the month of August, and it includes these premium football boxes that were released last Friday, and that has 3 new Wisconsin items in it, including a nice new hoodie and a nice hat, and they also have this this platinum pass that you get in the box that for future releases, you get early access to those. So check it out up at homefield.com. If you use the promo code Bucky24, you can get 15% off your first purchase. All right. So practice, as I said, was inside today. It was shorter than some of the practices that we've seen. I think how long did it go? 2 hours? Barely 2 hours?
Somewhere in that ballpark.
It was shorter, I feel like, than some of the practices that they've had this year, but so far in fall camp. What are some of the things that stood out to you? For me, I wrote down Jake Chaney a lot. He had a couple of sacks on back-to-back. He had sacks on back-to-back plays against the second-team offensive line. Then he got his hand on the ball twice in a passing in an 11-on-11 portion of practice. The first one would have been a nice interception. The second one, you got to catch. It was a pop fly, and he could have called a fair catch. That's how high that ball went up in the air off the ricochet. But when I think about that inside linebacker group, and I know there's so many people are excited about the new guys there, Jake Chaney is obviously going to be a force this year.
It says a lot about the fact that he held his ground at a time when this staff went to the portal to try and upgrade, and very easily could have lost his job if you go and sulk, if you don't perform on the field. But he became one of the team leaders, maybe the team leader, obviously, along with Hunter Wohler and Jack Nelson offensively. But you hear guys consistently praise his leadership, the way he's taken on that responsibility, and you got to, again, produce on the field. And Jaheim Thomas, it certainly looks like more and more, you'll see a lot of a Thomas Chaney combination. Christian Allegro will be in that mix as well. But Chaney very clearly is a number one. And I looked at initially of the guys coming in, I thought Tackett Curtis would be challenging for 1 reps. And while that's still a possibility, he's basically been with the 2s pretty consistently, and is still working his way back from having to deal with the surgery and the injury and all that stuff after last season. But Jake Chaney has been a force this preseason, and certainly looks primed for a really good 2024 campaign.
He does. And you mentioned some of the inside linebackers. I know that obviously Christian Allegro has been in and out here this last week, so that has maybe allowed for some more opportunities. But the first question that Mike Tressel was asked at his availability today that came from you, and it was, how many guys do you think you have here that can play? And he said he has 5 on Saturday. Can we write those guys down? It's Jake Chaney, right?
Thomas. Right. He went out of his way to praise Chaney and didn't mention any other names, but I don't really think that he needs to based on what we've seen. But yes, it's Chaney, Thomas, Allegro. All those guys have gotten 1 reps, and
that's 3
at the same time. And Tyler Janze and Tackett Curtis would be the 5 that it seems pretty obvious based on what we've seen. Janze, I think, has really worked his way up into a spot where, again, Mike Tressel feels like any of those 5 guys could contribute. They've all made plays to varying degrees. So they've got a deep room. And we should mention, obviously, the 3rd transfer they brought in at inside linebacker, Sebastian Cheeks, right now is playing at outside linebacker. And I have to say, while it is not with the ones, he looks really good for somebody who just moved over there. And while they also did the same thing with Ernest Willer Jr. from the defensive line to outside linebacker, because they're dealing with a depth shortage when you only have 6 scholarship outside linebackers, and then you got guys banged up like Aaron Witt and Thomas Heiberger, you need bodies. But Cheeks has been a consistent force, and I thought today had a very good day. So I don't know what that means. Maybe he can work his way into that 4th outside linebacker spot until Heiberger is back or Witt is fully ready. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility, but those 5 inside linebackers, it would seem, are capable of being contributors this season.
Well, Mike Tressel was asked about that transition for Sebastian Cheeks, and I believe he mentioned that he was at the will backer spot already. So it's not like it's huge change going over to playing. It's not a huge change. I think is kind of what he was saying, and why maybe Cheeks was able to hit the ground running at that new spot. And you're right, he had a really nice day today. And the defense overall, I thought, had a nice day today. And we'll get to some of the offensive guys. But when you think about this inside linebacker group, it's not going to be – I think back to 2020 where you have or 2021, you have Leo Chanel and you have Jack Sanborn, and they're playing every single down because Bob Bostad was like, we got our best guys, just put them out there. And maybe it was even that case – before Leo was ready to play, right? Where it was Jack Sanborn and I'm trying to think of the other guy. No, TJ. Maybe it was. I thought it was 2019. I'm trying to think who was next to him in 2019. It may have been Leo, but I thought he was a true freshman that year, so I don't think that he actually. Yeah. So Chris Orr, thank you, Zach. Chris Orr was the other guy inside, and you don't want to take them off the field. They're that good. Tressel made it clear that they can't play Jake Chaney 70 snaps a game. They have the ability and they have the guys there to be able to rotate and have different packages that he doesn't necessarily have to be a part of.
Yeah, this is where I think the addition of a guy like Jaheim Thomas is going to be so big because he's very versatile. They do these situations. If it's pass rush, they put 3 inside linebackers on the field, and Thomas is coming in off the edge. And I asked Thomas about that after practice today, and he said that he's actually very comfortable with that because that's what he did in high school. So he didn't necessarily do it in college, but he still has that skill set, and you can see some of that power and explosiveness. And it also allows different alignments. You can keep Jake Chaney on the field. You could also throw Christian Allegro out there. You still have a Daryl Peterson who can play a couple different spots. And so I think that that's really going to help. But because they have so much depth, you don't need to rely on 1 or 2 guys where they're going to wear down over the course of a season because they just are. And I think it's also worth mentioning because the offense is the way that it is, where it's a lot more fast paced. It's a lot different from what we've seen and what we grew accustomed to, where you knew every year Wisconsin was probably going to rank first or top 5 in time of possession because it was just a completely different style of offense. That also translates defensively. It means you're going to be on the field for more snaps or more minutes or seconds per game. So you don't want to have just 2 guys getting 70 plus snaps. And the good thing for this defense is they don't have to at that position.
They don't. There were a couple packages we saw today that when you're talking about having Jaheim Thomas on the outside, that was the 6 DBs, where you had Hunter Wohler essentially playing that dollar position that we talked about a lot last year, right? I know they didn't have necessarily the outside linebacker with his hand on the ground as part of that, at least today. But you had the 2 corners on the outside were Hallman and Forkreen. You had Max Lofi and RJ Delancey in the slot, and then you had the deep safety, which I think was Preston Zachman, and then you had Hunter Wohler up near the line of scrimmage to go along with Jake Chaney in the middle, and then the other guys on the outside. So I think, that to me is going to be a package that you're going to see on third and long or third and medium, where you're trying to heat the quarterback up. I don't know that you're going to see that formation on early downs because it's just so hard to stop the run that way. But I thought it was notable that RJ Delancey, who played a lot of slot in his, previously in his college career, we hadn't seen him there at all, was there in that package.
The other thing we've seen from this offense, which is so much different from what we've seen in years past, last year notwithstanding, is you see multiple slot receivers in at the same time. You have 4 guys lined up wide, so you can do that defensively. But absolutely, Tressel has a lot of choice, and you can do some of the things you did last year, but you can take what didn't work and refine it with a group of players that, at least from what we've seen, appear to have more talent and better fit what they want to do.
So was there anything else that you wanted to hit on with the inside linebackers before we move on?
I think it's pretty well covered.
Okay. All right. Moving to the other side of the ball. And again, I know that this was a guy that we talked a ton about in the spring of 2023, but it's a guy that keeps making plays, and that's Chris Brooks Jr. He had a really nice day on Wednesday and then made another really good play today. I caught a TD from Braden Locke in a team drill, out jumped RJ Delancey for it, essentially out physical for it, and got in the end zone. I don't know that there's a ton of reps available to him. He is not necessarily a burner, so it's not like he's the take the top off defense type of guy. But every time, in large stretches, every time he gets an opportunity, he's taken advantage of it.
He has. Some of this, I think, has to do with the fact that Quincy Burrows has not been participating in the live practice reps, and so that has meant someone else has to step up and get those 2 reps. And Chris Brooks Jr. has been one of those guys that's gotten a lot of those 2s. They've rotated a lot of guys with the 1 still. We know what Bryson Green has. Obviously, Vinny Anthony. CJ Williams has gotten a lot of the 1 reps as well. And Burrows, when healthy, you assume will be in that mix. That's 4 guys on the outside. But I think Brooks is right on the cusp there, and he offers something a little bit different in terms of that physicality, to the point that, like we've talked about before, I've had fans ask me, why don't you move him to tight end? Because he has that much physicality, and you see it, especially when he matches up against some of those smaller defensive backs. The key with him has always been, can you stay healthy? And we're seeing the fruits of that labor when he is healthy, because he can be a playmaker there.
Nobody cares, but that is what I did in NCAA football. So I moved him to tight end. The great thing about that is you can be like, I'm just going to move guys. This is what should happen in real life. They're never going to do it in real life, but that's what the NCAA football is all about. Move him, target him a bunch down the field because he's matchup nightmare. Matchup nightmare. Exactly what he could be if they moved him to tight end in this offense. Phil Longo, get on it. Yeah, he was solid. And then a couple of throws that I needed to point out from Tyler Van Dyke. One was a shot down the right side to Will Pauling that was as the throw was really, really good. The catch was probably just a smidge better than the throw, but he was just draped in coverage, and it was just a perfect drop in the bucket throw. And Will Pauling held onto it on the sideline for what would have been 30, 40 yards.
Yeah, it was a long one. Big hitter down the field.
And then the other one was a no, yes throw. The first thing in quarterback school that they teach you, I have to imagine, is never be going to your right, throw across your body late back to the middle of the field. It's the Brett Favre rule. It's, I don't mean to hurt any Vikings fans here, but it's the NFC Championship game from 2009. Don't throw late across your body back to the middle of the field. He did that today. TVD did that today. Tyler Van Dyke did that today, and just dotted one to CJ Williams for a touchdown right in front of, I think it was Braden Moore, who was coming hot, and it didn't matter because the throw was better. Now, he may have gotten sacked before he even got out to make that throw. I think if they had called the play dead, he would have. It's just a throw you don't want to make in a game unless it actually works. And I have to imagine that's the message from Phil Longo.
Well, these are part of the reasons why he's the starter and why he's earned the job. He got off to a bit of a slow start in both the spring and this preseason, and yet has been able to turn it on because he can be late and he can still deliver it with enough zip to get it by the DB and have CJ Williams just standing there and be able to haul it in. And it speaks to the other trait, which is the ability to get out of a pressure situation because he was on the run. And yeah, he might have been sacked. That's part of the challenge in evaluating everything we see in practice. But he was able to keep the play alive by scrambling, going to the right side. And just before he was about to go out of bounds, he found Williams. So there's really not much more we can say about those two throws other than, oh, yeah, that's why they went and got him. And of course, you got to hope that you see more of that if you're a Badgers fan once the season starts.
Yeah, I mean, that's 2 straight days where he's been late on a throw to CJ Williams and a DB missed it by this much, just a little bit. And it's a first down on Wednesday, and it was the touchdown today. Again, I don't know that's the throw. Today's throw, not yesterday's throw, but today's throws, I don't know is the one that you want your guy making. I don't know.
As long as it's successful, right?
Yes, and it was successful against the second-team defense today. So, yeah. But hell of a throw, and that's exactly, you're right. That's exactly why he is here and why he is the starting quarterback. I thought another guy who had a nice day-to-day was Elijah Hills. Made some nice plays, had a couple of pass breakups, had a couple deflections. Also, a guy dropped a guy in the backfield. He and Brandon Lane are among the guys that are going to have to play well for Wisconsin this year, just because, to be fair, they don't have anybody else. But again, Luke Fickell has talked about that being a spot that he feels better right now than he did at the beginning of fall camp.
Neither of those guys have gotten any reps with the ones, which I find really interesting. Having said that, that doesn't mean they're not going to be huge pieces to this defense. And this is why they went to the portal, because they needed not only bodies, but guys who could come in and be playmakers. And you look at the roster, it's the 6 veterans that are in the top 6. So for as much talent as they have down the line, and I think Dylan Johnson has had some flashes too, a guy as a true freshman who has come on a little bit. It's still, to me, going to be those top 6, and Lane and Hills have to be big pieces for this defense to be able to thrive.
Yep. All right. So as I said before, I wanted to do a little check-in here on the true freshman at this point. And I'm going to start with the guy that's on the picture right there. Actually, you know what? Let's go. I'm going to get lost. Let's just go position by position here. Mabry Mettauer. How do you think he has done? And do you think he is the future of the position after what you've seen in spring and 13 or 14 practices here in fall camp? I guess we've only seen like 11 or 12 of them, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well,
is he the future? That's the big question.
I have a few different thoughts on that. He's 2 weeks into his college career, and so it's as a practice quarterback. How about that?
I mean, he was here in the spring.
Oh yeah, never mind. He's many months into his college career.
There you go.
30 practices in. Like if I just look at the room and what there's going to be next year, if everything holds, it would be Braden Locke. I think there was a very clear delineation between those top two, and why Phil Longo has been so impressed with just the knowledge and the ability for him to run different things offensively with both Tyler Van Dyke and Braden Locke. But Braden's also been in a program for 2 different programs for 2 years. He's got 3 starts under his belt. I think Mabry's in a difficult spot because yes, you're going up against the threes, but your third team offensive line and the players around you are not guys that are going to be playing. I would have liked to have seen on Sunday night in Platteville what Luke Fickell said was the initial plan, to get Mabry some reps with the second team offense, just to have a sense of what that would look like, because the second team offense was going against the first team defense. There are some good things that he does. I think one thing he does well, especially if we're talking about this RPO game, and I saw this in the first week, is his ability to sell some of those fakes to the running back to make the defense sell out. I think he's got some of that skill set like a Tyler Van Dyke in terms of being able to pick up chunks of yardage as a tall guy and a long strider. That helps him. He's made some good throws, but he's also made a lot of mistakes. So is he the future? Look, if Braden Locke is here and they don't go get another quarterback, to me, it is Braden Locke. Of course, it's always portal season. You don't know who's going to decide to go, and you don't know who they're going to over-recruit or recruit over through the portal.
You never know. You never know. Running back, we talk about, is maybe the future of that position. The future at the position is maybe this year with Dylan Jones and line. But we have talked so much about how impressive I think both Ches Malusi and Tyree Walker are. And we know that Jackson Aker and Katie Akamelli have had good camps. But Dylan Jones and Darren Dupree, feels like it's them too.
I'd certainly like to see them get opportunities this season, because you just want to know what happens when they have the ball. Kind of feels like Dylan Jones has made a little bit of a move here, especially in this second week with the opportunities that he has earned. I know we talked before about a run that he had in Platteville. He broke off, would have been a 70-plus yard run. He's got a lot of power and speed. Where Dupree shines is in open space. He can do things as a receiver that I don't think is Jones's forte, but I also think there's probably some work that Dupree can do on not dancing as much, and the things you can do in high school you can't necessarily get away with in college. But both of them are just supremely talented. You understand why they went and got them and why Luke Fickell was so high on them. I will say, I do think that, yes, we talked a lot about Ches and Tawi, but Jackson Aker and Cade Yakimelli are not making it easy. I don't think it's a situation where they're just rolling over and these 2 young freshmen have taken over their roles. Now, it may be a situation where the staff says the ceiling on these 2 freshmen is higher and we want to give them an opportunity right away. But Aker has a unique skill set. He can, if he carries the ball, I feel good about him being able to push the pile forward and gain positive yardage, even if it isn't necessarily in the explosive way that, say, a Jones and Dupree could have. And Yakimelli too. I mean, there was a play even today where he was dead to rights in the backfield. He put a move on a defensive lineman and got out to the outside and had a nice gain. And so they have some good depth. They have a lot of options, but it's tough to deny the talent that you have in those 2 freshmen. And I think that both of them could see the field this season.
Fullback.
Oh, they have fullbacks?
No, they don't. That was a joke.
Jackson Aker.
Yeah. The blocking back, Jackson Aker. Wide receiver, where Kyan Barry Johnson is the lone scholarship true freshman.
I know you mentioned this on the last show, but Kyan Barry Johnson, if he can keep everything together, certainly looks like that next in line. He's gotten a lot of the majority of the second team reps as the slot receiver, because they have Will Pauling, but Trech Kekahuna is essentially a starter. He's gotten 2 reps too. But that has allowed them to give the second team reps to Kyan Barry Johnson. And he's been a favorite target of Braden Locke. And I think he's made more and more plays with more opportunities this second week, third week. So he's got a lot of talent. You get him into open space. He's got good hands that I don't necessarily see a ton of reps left for him this season, if you're going to have Pauling and Kekahuna both out there and the other options that they have. but I don't think it's an impossibility, especially when you consider that 4-game redshirt rule limit, to throw somebody out there if you feel like they're ready and see what they can do.
Well, find a way to get the ball in his hands, like it, in space. All three of those guys are just problems in space, and they can all get separation and get open. We've seen that, all three of them. And there were times last year that Wisconsin wide receivers struggled to do that. And if there's a struggle again this year, the additions of Tretch and potentially Kyan Barrett-Johnson could be huge for that, where you don't necessarily have to scheme them open. Tight end, where Grant Steck and Robert Booker are working with the threes and such.
I wouldn't expect to see either of those guys on the field this season, just because you got a really good top two. Riley Nowakowski, Tucker Ashcraft, and then Jackson McGowan and JT Seagreaves are the guys that are fighting for snaps as a potential number 3. Steck and Booker, they're young guys. I would say of the two of them, Steck would appear to be ahead based on the reps that we've seen him get as a blocker, to come in as a true freshman, carrying the weight that he does. He's got a lot of power there, but I would imagine from a snaps on offense standpoint, it's still a little ways away.
Along the offensive line, they brought in 5 scholarship offensive linemen at one point today. 4 of them were on the same line with the second team. Kevin Haywood obviously is the one that we've talked a ton about. I don't think we've ever talked more about a freshman offensive line group than we have with this one. Correct? Was that accurate?
It's hard for me to remember over the years.
Okay, just say yes.
No, because I want to say, was it 2014? Was it the Micah Kapoy year?
2015.
They started 15. They started 4 true freshmen against Minnesota. Am I wrong?
No.
Redshirt freshman?
Redshirt freshman.
All right. Then I guess you're right. You win this one, Zach.
All right. Well, that's 2-0 today. All right, sweet. The freshman at one point today, Kevin Haywood was the left tackle. Kerry Kudenko was the lone non-member of that. He was at left guard. You had Ryan Corey at center, Colin Cubberly at right guard, and Emerson Mandel at right tackle. And I'm like, at some point, yeah, that's going to be it. That may end up being the group. And obviously there's a really talented group coming in behind them that will certainly challenge. But when you look at the veteran aspect of the first team unit, the true freshmen own the second team unit, and we saw that today. Let's pick something. I mean, we've talked a ton about all these guys, maybe except for Ryan Corey, who we don't probably know a ton about.
Still. Yeah. I mean, of those 5, I think it's safe to say Kevin Haywood is the closest to playing, given the fact that when Riley Mallman has been sidelined, there have been instances where they've thrown Haywood into the first team at right tackle. Now, Barrett Nelson is in there getting some of those right tackle snaps, and that has allowed Haywood to get some reps with the 2s. But like Luke said, Emerson Mandel, Colin Cubberly, they're going to be in the 2 deep at some capacity. Derek Jensen has been a third-team tackle, but then has moved up to the 2s when there have been some other shuffling. With Ryan Corey, I think the center position is hard as it is. To do it when you're coming in as a true freshman in your first camp is even more difficult. There have been some instances where the snaps might not necessarily be where you want them to be, but he's gotten some 2 reps too. And so like you're talking about today, it's allowed them to try some different things. It's just hard to say with a guy that young, but there's a reason they went and got him. You never have enough interior depth on the line, and especially centers, which is such a tough position.
All right, let's flip over to the defensive line. We already mentioned a little bit with Dylan Johnson, but you obviously track this much better than I do, but got some second team reps today. Whereas most of his stuff has been with the third team, unless I'm inaccurate there.
Yeah, no, that is accurate. He's generally been, at least early in camp, was with the third team. You'd see him with Jamel Howard, Ernest Willer now moving over, another freshman. We can save him for outside linebacker if you want.
Yeah.
But I there's a lot to like about Dylan Johnson's game. I know I wrote about him this summer. The wrestling background, the leverage, the fact that, yeah, he may not be as tall as some other defensive linemen, but that can also be an advantage for him. Just in the leverage battle, he can make some plays that make you think, oh, he's only a true freshman. That's pretty impressive. And while I don't necessarily think that he's in the 2 deep, if you had to define it right now, I think Mike Tressel was asked about this too. He's close. He's pushing for that opportunity, and that's a good sign out of a true freshman.
Yeah. So the let's go to outside linebacker as long as you're talking about it. Ernest Willard Jr., part of this freshman outside linebacker class that also includes certainly
Anelu Lefele and Thomas Heiberger.
Thank you very much. All right, 2-1. And, before the injury, Thomas Heiberger would have been a highlight of this class, I think. And we'll see what happens with Anelu Lefele and whether he's able to find time. He's had moments in fall camp. But to me, Thomas Heiberger was one of the stars of this class before he got hurt.
Yeah, I was really high on him in the spring. He and Haywood were the two true freshmen that stood out. Heiberger, just for his ability to make plays and not look like a freshman, even though he's a different body type from some of these other outside linebackers. And Matt Mitchell said as much too, that if he were healthy, he would be in that mix to that number 5 or even number 4, depending on the circumstance, to play. But because he's banged up, Aaron Witt was out earlier and he's starting to come back, then you were down to 4 scholarship outside linebackers who were healthy enough to compete. And as a result, they moved Sebastian Cheeks out there from inside linebacker. They moved Ernest Willer out there from the defensive line. I don't know right now whether you'd say Willer or Lefele would be in the mix to play right away, but there's a lot of ceiling there. Lefele has had some days, and yes, it's come against the reserves, where he has really stood out, getting off the edge, multiple sacks kind of days. And Willer is just a talent for him to be able to do that, to come in as a defensive lineman, true freshman, and you're throwing him out there on the edge. He can also put his hand on the ground, obviously. So there's a lot of talent there. But like I said earlier, I almost feel like if the room holds the way that it is, that Sebastian Cheeks could be one who's pushing for opportunities. It's just that your top 3 are so well defined, I think, with Daryl Peterson, John Pius, and Leon Lowry. All 3 of those guys are going to take the lion's share of the snaps in my mind.
Yeah, I would agree. Going back to defensive line real quick, we forgot a guy, Hank Weber.
Yeah.
Who has been
haven't seen a ton of him.
Yeah, been working with the third team, with some of the young guys. Another big body that maybe is a future player there. Again, it's very early, very, very early for him. If you want to talk about a couple weeks into a college career, that's definitely the case for him. Inside linebacker with Landon Gauthier, a guy who came in early and is getting those third team reps along with the Garrison Soliday and some of those guys.
Yeah, they just have so much depth and talent at inside linebacker that it's easy to get buried early in your career. We talked about the 5 guys that Tressel feels like he can play. Garrison Soliday had a great practice in Platteville to the point that he went from getting some 3 reps to getting some 2 reps. And that's a walk-on for you. So there's a mountain to climb there for Gauthier, but they brought him here for a reason. And sometimes it takes the clearing out of the older guys to get your shot.
Yes. All right. Let's get to the guy that is actually the picture on the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, that is Xavier Lucas, the freshman out of Florida, the cornerback who has moved into a number 2. He's gotten time with the number 2. I know that a lot of guys got some run with that number 2 group today. Amari Snowden among them, but Xavier Lucas, I think, could end up being one of the stars of this class. Certainly early returns suggest that.
I think he's got to play in some capacity. I just don't necessarily know what that looks like, especially when you've got Hallman and Forkerine on the outside, guys that you're going to want on the field as much as possible. But if you need a reserve to put in there, Lucas, we talk about the freshman running backs. They don't look like freshmen. Lucas does not look or play like a freshman. He seems fearless. He's willing to throw it in there, even if it's against a Bryson Green, to break up a pass. He's got the physicality and size, and they've been raving about him even since the recruiting process. It was a huge win for them to pull him out of Florida when he could have gone to Miami very easily. It was in doubt for a little while, even though he had previously committed to Wisconsin. It kind of went down to the wire there. So I agree with you, Zach. I think he'll end up being probably one of those guys. You go down the list of the 2024 class near the top in terms of guys who could be most effective in terms of their on-field productivity. And that could start this season.
Couple other guys that are getting reps with the third team right now, Emilio Agard and Jay Harper.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a ton of them. I've seen some occasional good plays from Jay Harper. I think Agard is kind of steadily working his way back, but that was another big recruiting win. That was a Colin Hitchler one, a kid out of Philadelphia, a 4-star prospect. They've got a lot of talent in the defensive back room. And, I know you'll get to Raphael Dunn as well in the safety room. They've really loaded up on the secondary here these last couple classes.
Yeah, Raphael Dunn's actually the last one to bring up. And he looks, dude's 6'4" and 200 pounds. And he looks like a body that I think once he gets a year with Brady, Collins is going to look like a much different person, and I think as a player. But he's certainly fluid. It's just he certainly needs a year probably to become a player.
His high school coach described him to me as a unicorn, which I think is the best way to put it. You don't see guys that are 6'4" that can be as versatile as him and play safety. You just don't see that very often. You could say the same thing about Amari Snowden, who's a redshirt freshman who's playing cornerback, 6'3", 6'4". But lanky, lean, and I think there's been at least one instance where it was a welcome to college moment where you have someone kind of going through him, but that's to be expected of young guys. But length, athleticism, the two buzzwords you've heard all offseason, Dunn has both of those.
Definitely does. And he stands out when you're that big and you're running around in the secondary. You stand out. So looking forward to seeing what Brady Collins and that staff can do with him, because I think he's going to look like a completely different person and player by the time we get to see him again, or assuming when we get to see him again in bowl prep, and then probably more likely in spring ball after a full winter conditioning session with Collins and his staff. So Wisconsin, that is a look through your true freshman, scholarship true freshman. There are non-scholarship true freshmen. I don't know that there's any ones to talk like necessarily that we can sit here and talk about very intelligently. So we won't. Wisconsin will be back on the field we will get to see Wisconsin on the field again on Saturday as they hold a scrimmage, hopefully inside Camp Randall Stadium. It's the last one open to the media, and then we'll be back to talk about it. Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Camp.